Hello, my name's Olurotimi Osha. I was just watching the news and I saw an interview of an American woman whose Jamaican husband was detained by ICE, by immigration, on their return from vacation, right, outside of the country. So he's a permanent resident, right? He's a lawful permanent resident, but based on a new law, right? There's a new law, Blanche versus who was the person? I can't remember the other person, but there's a new law that allows um, uh, border patrol officers to parole green card holders, lawful permanent residents, on their return into the U.S. to parole them and detain them for deportation uh, if they have been charged with a crime, right? If they've been charged with a crime, so it's a new law, and that's just that was what they were executing against uh, this lawful permanent resident. So in the discussion, it was disclosed that he had prior charges for assault, right? He had a long sheet for assault. And I decided to talk about common ways that Nigerians can get easily get arrested, right? The easiest ways for the Nigerians to get arrested in the United States so that they can avoid it. By the way, this does not constitute legal advice, right? It doesn't constitute legal advice. But there's a comedian, Godfrey, right? His parents are Nigerian, but he was born here in America. He's an American, and he likes to do a skit in which he shows people fighting, right? Often maybe black people beating up a white person, or sometimes just people fighting. He's shown, videos of two people, fighting. I guess he's into fighting, and that's the funny thing. America is a very violent society, and of course, we do produce a lot of violent videos. America, not me, but America, Hollywood churns out many violent videos and whatnot. But the thing is, assault is heavily prosecuted in the United States, right? People think that, well, that fighting uh, in America is the same thing as fighting in Nigeria. In Nigeria, you get into a fight, sometimes the police will even watch you, see who wins the fight. They'll leave you, so long as you're not killing each other, right? But in America, fighting is prosecuted by the state. It's an offense against the state. It's a disturbance of the peace, depending on the state, on the state or the jurisdiction. But if you assault anybody, and assault has different levels, right? Even threatening someone constitutes assault. For instance, in the state of Maryland, threatening someone with violence or putting someone in an apprehension and a fear of being hit, right, is assault, a second degree assault in the state of Maryland, and that's severely prosecuted. So, um, as I said, this doesn't constitute legal advice, but I'm going to discuss the easiest way, the most common ways for Nigerians to get arrested in America. In for Nigerians in America, it's assault, it's fighting, and they don't realize if you fight, you hit somebody. There's no such thing as self-defense, right? We have it in our constitution. We say self-defense, and depending on the state. But if you plead self-defense, right, it's not something that happens right away there. If you hit someone, right, in a fight, you've hit someone physically, you've caused a battery or whatever, then the state still files charges against you, and you get to argue your case in court, right? If self-defense is what you're trying to argue, that what, you were under attack and you had no other option but to defend yourself, that's something you get to prove in a court of law, uh, before a jury of your peers. And the state has a burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that you assaulted someone, and there are consequences, right? There are severe penalties. So assault is the easiest way, why not, is the easiest reason, the most common reason uh, why Nigerians get arrested in America for fighting, assault. It's heavily prosecuted in America, right? There's no such thing really in practice as self-defense. Get it out of your head. If somebody assaults you or somebody's about to attack you, you just have to let it be. Americans have guns, right? Those people who fire guns in self-defense and hit someone, end up getting locked up, and they have to prove before a judge and before a jury of their peers beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, it's the state that has the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed assault or murder, whatever it is. It's and your defense attorney, or you, whatever the case may be, you try to prove your innocence in a court of law. But practically, when you're in the streets, before you get to the courts, the police knows there's some kind of violence that's occurred. You get charges, you get arrested. So avoid it. Avoid fighting. Right? There's no such thing as self-defense in America. Right? It's any form of combat is viewed as a disturbance of the peace or a crime against the state, right? So you want to get that out of your mind. I saw, while I was wrongfully detained, I've talked about how I was wrongfully detained. I came across a Nigerian, just in his 20s. It was just about 26 years old. He was a college graduated from University of Maryland, College Park, and he was in finance, right? He was in investment banking, meaning he was making a lot of money. Very polished, very, you knew he wasn't meant to be detained. He wasn't meant to be in jail. And he told me what happened. He was at a bar, and some guy hit him, and he hit back. Assault. That was a simple reason why he was there. If he hadn't hit back, he wouldn't be locked up in jail. He might beat the case. He might beat the charge, but the reason why they lock you up before your trial, before conviction, is one, the state has a right to do that once you've been charged with a crime. And the state's argument is that, well, you might pose a flight risk, and if in the case of assault, right, it will just view you as a public safety threat, right? It doesn't want you to go fight while you're out awaiting your trial, because that's called pretrial detention, right? The state wouldn't want you to get into a fight or endanger anybody, right? So once you've been in a fight, the state sees you as a very dangerous person, that you're a public safety threat. So you have to be very careful. Don't come to America and fight, right? Nigerians, assault, again, that's the most common thing for Nigerians. For others, generally though, interestingly, in the state of Maryland, the easiest way to get arrested, right, for first-time offenders, the easiest way is actually driving under the influence, right? Driving under the influence, DUI, and then probation violation for DUI. While I was wrongfully detained, I saw there was now a rise in arrests of Spanish people, right? By the way, I'm not a criminal. I abhor violence or criminal behavior. The state of Maryland, of course, committed color of law violations by wrongfully detaining me. But that's I've done videos discussing that. But while I was wrongfully detained, I used the opportunity to do investigative journalism, right? To ask people questions. Why were they detained? And I saw there was a rise in arrests of Latino people, right? Latino men. There was a rise in their arrests, and the most common reason was driving under the influence. Very common. And I had a Mexican American cellmate, and I asked him. He told me his whole story. He told me how he came to America, and he was now an American citizen. He had two beautiful kids. He had a house in Montgomery County, Maryland. Montgomery County is one of the most expensive, one of the richest counties in America, right? And he was a Mexican immigrant who, crossed the border on foot. He was married to a blonde American woman, a white American woman. They had kids together. He'd been in America for 25 years. He was a middle-aged guy, but he had a series of DUIs, driving under the influence, several of them, right? It's kind of interesting that it's legal to drink alcohol, but and people go to a bar to drink alcohol. It's illegal to get behind the wheel, right? After you've had alcohol. That's the trick. And so this is always getting people, uh, a lot of people in trouble. And so he explained the reason why it was a common problem amongst people of yeah, from Latin America, right? And this, I don't want to stereotype, but this was what a Mexican guy was actually telling me. And he's literally from Mexico. Very successful guy, right? Successful guy. Um, the American dream, has a house, two kids. He's married to a white woman, a blonde woman. He's he's stayed in the same jobs, two jobs for over 20 years. The first two jobs he got in America, he's still in them. He became a manager in a construction company and also a manager in a restaurant. So he does those two jobs. Middle class, makes in is a six figure income range, right? So he works very hard. In fact, his employer, just to show how reliable he's viewed, his employer was paying his legal fees, right? His employer was paying his legal fees. They're still paying him. He was still receiving a paycheck while he was detained in jail. They were paying his legal fees. They were paying his mortgage, right? Taking care of all of that, expecting that he'd come out. Unfortunately for him, because he violated probation, he had the DUI, and then his license got suspended because he had several DUIs, right? So his license was suspended, and then he wasn't allowed to get behind the wheel. So he did get behind the wheel. He thought he was set up. So they watch you, right? He believed somebody set him up because he's stunned about the way it happened. So he got behind the wheel, and so for violation of probation, he got 10 years. He was convicted. He got 10 years in prison. He's gone to prison and he'll be there for 10 years, right? And I was checking his case, hoping that, the judge will be lenient on him, considering, he's a role model. But look, you're not a role model because of the drinking DUI. Ironically, a lot of powerful people in America are alcoholics. Congress people in law schools, doctors, these people drink regularly, right? So it's unfortunate. But this guy got 10 years in prison. He explained to me that, excuse me, DUIs were very common amongst Hispanic Americans because he said, well, the first generation, right, the migrants, right, because he said they just because of the hard work and adjusting to the environment, and he said it's at the bar that they can fraternize together, and it's a source of outlet just from working so hard, right? Like this guy works two jobs. He's done the same two jobs for the past 20 years, and he's married to a white woman. This was his explanation to me that he didn't. They were very cool together, but he's like there's still some challenges about leaving home, right? Being away from home, and he says it's just it's an outlet for stress. I don't drink, so I wouldn't know, but this was his explanation because I saw it was the most common offense for Hispanic Americans or Latino Americans, right, or people from Latin America in Montgomery County. It was the most common reason why they were arrested, detained. And unfortunately, this guy who had a DUI, and then he violated probation, and then he got 10 years in prison for that. He's in prison now. He was convicted. So for Nigerians, again, but for Nigerians, the most common reason why they are locked up is because of assault, right? Not because of fraud, right? Fraud is common, but not everybody gets into white collar fraud. But violent offenses, right? That's the most common for Nigerians, assault. So you've got to be very careful. Now, something else that's going to be on the rise, because I was a victim of this, right? A perjured emergency evaluation petition, right? Somebody claiming to be my family. I've talked about it. Howard University professor Jide Warrior filed a fabricated and perjured emergency evaluation petition after he had trespassed, he'd assaulted me with a Gurmashumi, a neighbor in my home, and then up to add insult to injury, he fabricated an emergency petition which left me injured, severely, abused, bruised, detained, and all of that. So I learned at the hospital, physicians explained to me that it's a common offense by Nigerians. Nigerians file false emergency petitions because Nigerians, they typically beat their children, back home. They can do that. That's a form of discipline, but they can't do it in America. So in America, many kids report their parents to um, the social services or whoever or the police for hitting them, right? Forget those videos that you see that somebody comes, those ads and they say the police says, yeah, it's a good thing you beat your kids. No, it doesn't happen in real life. If your kid calls the cops on you for hitting them, you're going to jail. If the police show up and they see, that yes, you've been abusive, that they find evidence, you're going to be prosecuted. There was a Howard professor that told me of his story, a former Howard professor, right? He hit his daughter, he was trying to discipline his daughter, trying to stop her from going out, and she reported him, and he ended up in jail, right? It's just common. It's common. It's quite common. People beat their kids. So as a workaround, right? As a ruse, right? A device, some kind of ruse to get around that. The parents lie that their children, some parents, some, not all, they fabricate and file emergency petitions and say their kids are hallucinating, they're delusional, so that they will lock them up in mental health institutions and force them to take medication, so that if the cops show up and that, well, you've been beating your kids, so the parents can just say, well, the kid is delusional, right? And so this is on the rise, according to a physician I met, and hopefully it's gonna be prosecuted. When Nigerians come to America, you should obey the laws, right? Obey the laws, obey the rules here. Don't abuse the laws. Jide Wariri, a Howard University professor, he broke the laws here, right, by filing a perjured emergency evaluation petition, fabricating it, and he assisted and conspired with a Gurmashuni, a neighbor, an Ethiopian neighbor, a foreign non-citizen neighbor I'd never spoken with, can't speak a word of English. He went to fabricate a peace order, claiming he was a victim of, he was my victim. The guy Jide Wari came and assaulted me with, right? He now fabricated a peace order in order to claim a U visa immigration benefit. So Nigerians are going to be prosecuted for these things. When you're in a foreign land and your new home, you want to obey the rules, follow the laws. My name is Oluro Timiosha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.